The wine hit Ava Cole's chest while her 12-year-old son stood beside her frozen as the room burst into laughter. No one tried to stop it. No one looked ashamed. It wasn't an accident. The glass didn't slip. The rich kid holding it didn't look surprised. Red liquid spread across Ava's light jacket, soaking through the fabric, dripping onto the polished floor between her shoes. For half a second, no one spoke. Then the laughter came again. Not nervous, not shocked, comfortable. Ava froze. Noah was standing right next to her. Old enough to understand what had just happened. Young enough to still believe adults wouldn't do something like this on purpose. Someone near the front laughed louder than the rest. Another voice added a comment Ava didn't catch. A woman raised her phone and angled it casually, already recording. No one reached for a napkin. No one said Ava's name. The rich kid with the glass smiled. Evan Whitmore, 20-something, expensive suit. The relaxed confidence of someone whose last name could buy silence. "Relax," he said. "It's just a joke." The people around them nodded. Some smiled. Others looked away just long enough to feel decent about it. Ava felt Noah's fingers dig into her sleeve. Not panic, confusion. The kind that stays. If you've ever been publicly humiliated and realized everyone else decided it was deserved, you know the moment. It's when you stop being a person and become something else in the room. Something temporary. Something acceptable to laugh at. Ava had been invited here. Her name was printed on the program, thick paper gold lettering under keynote guest Ava Cole, CEO, Cole Hospitality Group. She'd stood on this same floor years ago accepting thanks for feeding families when the factory shut down. Back then, people clapped when she walked in. She was the same woman now, same shoulders, same steady hands, just with a title the room liked to repeat when it benefited them. A black CEO when they needed a photo. A target when they wanted a laugh. Tonight they watched her like she didn't belong. She looked around the hall. Familiar faces avoided her eyes. Some didn't bother. The banner above the stage still read "Honoring Local Leaders." The words hung there untouched by what was happening underneath them. Noah whispered Mom Ava didn't answer. She was listening. Not to the speaker warming up on stage, but to the silence where someone should have stepped in. Evan Whitmore leaned closer. "You should probably move," he said. "You're blocking the aisle." Ava finally looked at him. Clean suit, relaxed posture, the kind of young man who'd never been corrected in public. Ava said nothing. She placed the folded program on the edge of a nearby table, straightened it. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. Behind her, someone muttered, "Unbelievable," but the tone carried amusement, not concern. A man Ava had known for over a decade shifted his weight and turned away. A woman Ava once helped cover rent for laughed quietly into her drink. No one argued. No one questioned it. The room had already decided. Ava stepped half a pace forward, placing herself between Noah and the crowd. It didn't change anything. It was instinct. On stage, the microphone squealed. "If everyone could take their seats," a voice said cheerfully. The event continued. Applause followed a name being read. Not hers. The stain on Ava's jacket darkened as it dried. If this moment feels familiar, it might be because you've stood somewhere you once mattered and felt it disappear without warning. People don't always say it out loud, but when they do, they tend to leave traces of it, sometimes quietly, sometimes where others can recognize it and realize they weren't alone. Ava reached for Noah's coat and draped it over her son's shoulders. The room was warm. Noah didn't argue. They walked toward the exit. No one stopped them. Near the door, a woman Ava had known for years stepped aside without looking at her, as if contact might be inconvenient. Her smile stayed in place for the people behind them. It was the same smile she wore every Sunday when she came into Cole's. Outside, the night air felt sharper than it should have. Noah didn't move right away. He stared back at the building. Light spilled through tall windows. Applause rose again as another name was announced, a name that wasn't Ava's. Why were they laughing? Noah asked. Ava unlocked the car. The sound was too loud in the quiet street. Sometimes people laugh, she said carefully, because it's easier than admitting something's wrong. Noah nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Ava took the driver's seat. Her jacket stuck slightly against the upholstery. She didn't take it off. As they pulled away, she checked the mirror. The building faded behind them, but the feeling stayed. The understanding that something had shifted, that whatever protection familiarity once offered had quietly expired. Back inside the hall, someone replayed the video. Someone else added a comment. Evan Whitmore accepted congratulations disguised as jokes. And out in the parking lot inside her car, Ava watched the same clip sent to her without asking. She didn't ask what happened. The video explained enough. The laugh, the phones, the way the room made it feel normal. Ava held out her hand. "Send me the number for Whitmore's deal team." Someone hesitated, then obeyed. Ava watched the clip once, then again. Her expression didn't change. Then she said quietly, like she was approving a routine expense, "Cancel the Whitmore deal." A blink. The whole thing. Ava nodded. All of it. Effective immediately. No warnings. Ava finally looked up. Calm. Final. "They laughed while I stood there," she said. "So they can learn what it costs." Ava drove toward Cole's, toward the place that still smelled like coffee late at night, toward a life that hadn't officially changed yet, even if the rules had. If you're still listening, it's probably because part of you wants to know what happens when a woman who's been quietly erased refuses to explain herself, refuses to perform gratitude, and refuses to beg for space she already earned. People stay with stories like this, not because they expect revenge, but because they recognize the moment dignity is tested in public. At a red light, Noah spoke again. "They didn't even say sorry." Ava looked straight ahead. "I know." The light turned green. They drove on, carrying the weight of a room full of people who had already decided she no longer counted, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the deepest injustice isn't the act itself, but how easily everyone agrees to look away. Ava unlocked Cole's just before 5 in the morning, the way she had for years. Because before she was the CEO of a company, she was the daughter of a woman who taught her how to open a door and keep it open. The street was quiet. The windows across the road were dark. Inside, the air still held the faint smell of yesterday's coffee and oil that never quite left the walls. She flipped on the lights one by one. Not all at once. She never did. It was a habit she'd picked up from her mother, who used to say it made the place wake up more gently. Noah sat in the booth near the window jacket folded beside him. Homework spread out, even though school didn't start for another hour. He didn't look up when Ava walked past. He was pretending to read. Ava didn't comment on it. She set her jacket on the back of a chair in the kitchen and rinsed her hands at the sink longer than necessary. The red stain had dried stiff overnight. She hadn't washed it yet. She hadn't decided why. The grill hummed to life. The sound filled the space in a way silence couldn't. Ava liked that. Silence invited questions. This place had never been fancy. No exposed brick on purpose. No handwritten chalkboard menus meant to look careless. Just tables that matched because her mother insisted booths repaired more times than she could count, and a counter polished smooth by decades of elbows. Ava's name wasn't on the sign outside. It never had been. The diner was called Cole's, but everyone knew who ran it, or at least they used to. She cracked eggs into a bowl one at a time, careful not to rush. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past without stopping. That used to mean something. It meant business was coming. Lately, it didn't. Noah finally spoke. "Are you wearing that jacket again?" Ava glanced over. "I forgot to grab another one." Noah nodded. He knew that wasn't true. They ate quietly. Scrambled eggs, toast, the same breakfast Noah had eaten most mornings since he was little. Ava watched him pick at the edges first, the way he always had. Some things didn't change, even when everything else did. This was the part of the day Ava understood best. Before opinions formed, before conversations turned sideways, before people decided what version of her they needed. Years ago, when her mother was still alive, mornings were louder. She talked to the radio like it could hear her. She complained about prices, weather people who didn't tip enough. She had filled the space with certainty. Ava had learned early that running a place like this wasn't about food. It was about presence. Showing up even when no one thanked you. After she passed, Ava kept the schedule. Not because she loved it, but because it kept the ground from shifting too much under her feet. After her husband died, she kept it again. Routine was easier than grief. Noah finished eating and gathered his things. "I'll walk to school," he said. Ava nodded. "I'll lock up in a bit." Noah hesitated, then leaned in and hugged her. Not tightly, just long enough to count. "Bye, Mom. Have a good day." The bell over the door chimed as Noah left. Ava stood there for a moment after it stopped ringing, listening to the quiet settle back in. By 7, a few regulars came in. Fewer than usual. They took their seats without comment. One man glanced at Ava's jacket, then quickly away. Another nodded but didn't linger like he normally did. Ava poured coffee, refilled it, didn't ask questions. If you've ever felt a room cool toward you without anyone explaining why, you know how fast it happens. No announcement, no confrontation. Just space where warmth used to be. Mid-morning, a woman Ava had known since Noah was a toddler came and ordered tea instead of her usual coffee and sat near the door. She spoke to the waitress quietly, eyes down. "Everything okay?" Ava asked as she passed. She smiled, polite and thin. "Of course." She didn't look at Ava again. Ava wiped the counter. She had already wiped it twice. Around noon, Thomas Reed walked in. Thomas used to sit at the counter every Tuesday. Used to ask about Noah. Used to complain about his job and laugh about it afterward. Today, he took a booth in the back. Ava noticed. She always noticed. Thomas waited until the food arrived before speaking. "Rough night," he said, finally. Ava shrugged. "It happens." Thomas nodded, staring at his plate. "People talk." "I know." There was a pause, the kind that asks for reassurance without saying so. "I didn't laugh," Thomas added. Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. Not laughing wasn't the same as doing something. Thomas shifted in his seat. "You know how these things go. Folks don't like being uncomfortable." Ava wiped her hands on a towel. "Neither do I." Thomas smiled weakly. "Right." He ate quickly and left cash on the table instead of paying at the register. Ava watched him go, wondering when exactly the balance had shifted when being decent had started to feel like a liability. The afternoon passed slowly. Fewer orders. Longer gaps between customers. Ava kept moving, kept busy. That was the rule. As she cleaned the grill, her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She ignored it until the vibration stopped. When she checked later, it was a short message from a number she recognized but hadn't heard from in a while. Saw the video. Rough situation. No question. No follow-up. Ava put the phone face down. She remembered the first time she'd felt indispensable here. The storm that knocked out power across half the town. People had crowded into Cole's because the gas stove still worked. Ava and her mother cooked until their hands ached. They didn't charge for half of it. No one asked them to. It just seemed obvious at the time. That was years ago. Gratitude has a short memory. By late afternoon, the place was nearly empty. Ava sat at the counter with a cup of coffee she didn't drink, staring at the door. She thought about the fundraiser again, about the way the room had shifted before the wine even hit her, about how some people had already been smiling, waiting for something to happen. It wasn't just the spill. That was obvious now. The spill had been permission. This was what being erased looked like, not shouted down, just quietly set aside. Ava locked up early. She didn't turn the sign around to closed. She just flipped off the lights and pulled the door shut. At home, Noah was already there, shoes by the door, backpack on the chair. He looked up. How was today slow? Noah nodded. He understood slow. They ate dinner together. Pasta. Simple. Noah talked about school. About a quiz he thought he did okay on. Ava listened, asked questions, kept her voice even. After dishes, Noah went to his room. Ava sat at the table longer than necessary, hands folded, staring at nothing in particular. She thought about her mother's chair in the corner of Cole's, the one she refused to throw out even after it broke the third time. People lean on it, she'd said. That means it's doing its job. Ava had leaned on that chair more than once. Lately it felt like the room had leaned away from her instead. That night, as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Different number. Done. Whitmore deal, $650 terminated. No negotiation, no second meeting. You should think about your position. Some things don't bounce back. Ava stared at the screen a moment longer than she meant to. She hadn't needed to call anyone twice. She hadn't needed to explain. She'd seen enough to know who she was dealing with and who she wasn't. Ava set the phone down without replying. Outside, a car passed slowly. She listened to the sound fade. She didn't feel angry. Not yet. Mostly tired. Tired of pretending not to notice the looks. Tired of being careful with words that used to come easily. Tired of carrying a role everyone else seemed ready to take away. If this sounds familiar, it's because moments like this don't come with warning signs. They come wrapped in politeness, in advice disguised as concern, in silence that asks you to make yourself smaller so everyone else can stay comfortable. Ava closed her eyes. By morning, Cole's would still be there. The lights would still turn on, the grill would still heat. People would still come in, some out of habit, some out of curiosity. What they wouldn't do anymore was see her the way they once had. And Ava, lying awake in the dark, understood something clearly for the first time since the laughter in that hall. Whatever came next wouldn't be about fixing a misunderstanding. It would be about deciding what she was willing to give up and what she wasn't. The man waited until the diner was nearly empty. Ava noticed him before the door opened. The way the street went quiet again. The way a shadow paused just long enough outside the glass before stepping in. She didn't recognize the face, but she recognized the posture. Relaxed. Certain. The kind of confidence that doesn't ask permission. The bell over the door rang once. Ava was wiping down the counter. She didn't rush. She finished the section she was on, folded the cloth, and looked up. Ava Cole, the man asked. Yes. The man smiled. Daniel Mercer. He extended a hand. Ava hesitated for half a second, then shook it. The grip was firm but brief, as if the gesture itself wasn't important. Daniel glanced around Cole's. Not critically, casually. As if he were walking through a property he already owned but hadn't decided what to do with yet. Mind if we sit? He asked. Ava gestured to a booth near the window. Daniel chose the one across from it instead, placing himself with a clear view of the door and the counter. I'll be quick. Daniel said, settling in. I know you're busy. Ava stayed standing. What can I help you with? Daniel leaned back slightly. I represent Whitmore Capital, and a few partners who were very interested in working with you until last night turned into a public spectacle. Ava's expression didn't change. There's a lot of interest lately, Daniel continued. Development, revitalization, new opportunities. Ava waited. Daniel smiled again as if appreciating Ava's restraint. Cole sits in a very strategic location. Not just for this town, for the story people like to sell about it. Ava rested her hands on the edge of the table. It's been here a long time. That's actually part of the appeal, Daniel said smoothly. History matters. People like continuity. He glanced toward the kitchen, then back. But continuity also requires adaptation. Ava said nothing. Daniel crossed one leg over the other. I won't pretend you don't know why I'm here. Last night put you back on a lot of radars. And then you canceled a $650 million deal. Ava's jaw tightened just slightly. Don't misunderstand, Daniel added. I'm not here to discuss that incident. What happened was unfortunate. Unfortunate. The word landed exactly where it was meant to. What I'm here to discuss, Daniel continued, is the future. Ava finally spoke. My future. Daniel nodded. And your sons. Ava's gaze hardened. Leave Noah out of it. Daniel raised both hands, palms open. Of course. Of course. I only mean stability. Security. He leaned forward a little. This place means something to people. But sentiment doesn't pay taxes. It doesn't protect you when zoning changes, when inspections tighten, when rent goes up around you. Ava studied his face. There was no threat in Daniel's tone. That was the point. You're saying I should sell, Ava said. I'm saying you should consider options, Daniel replied, before decisions get made for you. Ava felt the pressure then, not from the words, but from how calmly they were delivered, as if resistance were already accounted for, as if this conversation were a courtesy, not a negotiation. Daniel reached into his jacket and placed a slim folder on the table. He didn't slide it over. He set it down within reach, then withdrew his hand. Take your time, he said. Look it over when you're ready. Ava didn't touch it. This diner has survived worse than market trends, Ava said. Daniel smiled. I'm sure it has. But times change. Communities change. He glanced around again, more deliberately this time. People forget. Ava stood a little straighter. I'm not interested. Daniel's smile didn't fade. It softened. You might be. Soon. Ava held his gaze. No. There it was. Clear. Unembellished. For the first time, Daniel's eyes sharpened. Not angry. Evaluating. I respect that, he said after a moment. Truly. Women like you value independence. He stood smoothing his jacket. Just remember, independence works best when it's supported. Ava didn't respond. Daniel tapped the folder lightly with one finger. I'll leave this here. No pressure. He walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Ava looked up. Public moments have consequences, Daniel said calmly. They don't always end when the room empties, especially when the people laughing have last names the town depends on. The bell rang again as he left. Ava waited until the sound faded before reaching for the folder. She didn't open it. She simply turned it over once, then set it back down. Outside, a delivery truck drove past without slowing. That evening, Noah noticed the folder immediately. What's that? He asked, dropping his backpack by the door. Nothing you need to worry about, Ava said. Noah frowned. Everyone keeps saying that. Ava hesitated. Sometimes people say it because they don't know how to explain things yet. Noah nodded, but the answer didn't settle him. They ate dinner quietly. Noah talked less than usual. Ava listened more than she spoke. Later, as Noah did homework at the table, Ava opened the folder. She scanned the pages quickly. Numbers, timelines, polite language wrapped around firm expectations. It wasn't an offer. It was a plan. Ava closed it and set it aside. The next morning, the diner was quieter than it had been the week before. A few regulars came in, ordered, quickly left sooner than usual. One man started to say something, then stopped. By midday, Ava's phone buzzed again. "You should talk to Daniel. He's reasonable. No name attached. None needed." Ava typed a reply, then deleted it. In the afternoon, a city notice appeared, taped neatly near the door. Routine. Nothing alarming on its own, just enough to be noticed. That was how it worked. Small nudges, gentle reminders. That night, Ava sat in her mother's old chair at the diner after closing, the one her mother refused to replace. She rested her elbows on the table and stared at the wall across from her. She thought about the fundraiser, about the laughter, about how easily the room had shifted, how quickly people adjusted to a new version of her. This was the next step. She could see that now. The humiliation wasn't the point. It was the opening. At home, Noah knocked on her bedroom door before bed. "Are we okay?" he asked. Ava met his eyes. "We're okay." Noah studied her face. "You sure?" Ava nodded. Yes. It wasn't a lie. Not yet. After Noah went to sleep, Ava checked her phone one last time. Another message had come in. "Just trying to help. Think about it." Ava turned the phone off and set it face down. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, then steadied. She didn't know yet how far this would go. Only that the conversation had already moved beyond courtesy, beyond suggestion. The choice was still hers, for now. And that Ava understood clearly was exactly what made the timing matter. The changes didn't arrive loudly. There was no confrontation, no warning meeting, no raised voices, just small shifts that stacked on top of one another until Ava felt the weight without being able to point to a single cause. The first supplier called on a Tuesday morning. "I'm really sorry," the man said. "This isn't personal." Ava had heard that phrase enough times to know what came next. "We're adjusting our routes, tightening things up." Ava looked at the order sheet on the counter. "We've had the same schedule for years." "I know," the man said. "But things are different now." The line went quiet after that. The call ended politely. The delivery didn't come. By the end of the week, 2 more suppliers followed. Same tone, same explanation. None of them said Daniel Mercer's name. None of them had to. Ava adjusted. She always did. She changed menu items quietly, made do, didn't complain. That had always been her way. Customers noticed anyway. "Did you stop making the soup?" one woman asked. "Just for now," Ava said. She nodded, disappointed. "I'll try something else." She didn't come back the next day. The diner stayed open. The lights still turned on, but the rhythm changed. Tables stayed empty longer, chairs stayed pushed in. If you've ever felt a place slowly turn its back on you, you know how subtle it is. No one tells you to leave. They just stop meeting you halfway. Ava watched it happen without reacting. She wiped counters that were already clean. She checked the register more often than necessary. She stayed later as if effort alone could correct momentum. At school, Noah felt it too. He didn't say anything at first. Ava noticed the signs instead. Shorter answers, longer silences. shoes kicked off harder than usual. One afternoon, Noah came home with a folded note from his teacher. Ava read it at the kitchen table while Noah hovered near the door. He got into a disagreement, the note said carefully. "Nothing serious." Ava looked up. "What happened?" Noah shrugged. "Some kid said you were getting kicked out. I told him he was wrong." And then Noah shrugged again. He laughed. Ava folded the note and set it down. "Did you get in trouble?" "No." "Did you hit him?" Noah shook his head. "I wanted to." Ava nodded. She understood that part more than she liked. The next day, a city notice appeared on the diner's door. Routine language, standard inspection window. Ava had passed inspections before. She wasn't worried. But the timing wasn't accidental. Inside a man Ava had known since her teens stopped by for coffee. He stood instead of sitting. "You doing okay?" the man asked. Ava nodded. "Fine." The man hesitated. "You know how this town is. People get nervous when things shift." "What's shifting?" Ava asked. The man smiled uncomfortably. "You know." He left without ordering. By Friday, Ava had learned something new about exhaustion. It wasn't physical. It was the constant calculation, the need to measure every interaction, every word, every look. At night, she sat with Noah at the kitchen table, helping with homework, pretending everything was normal. Noah played along. That worried Ava more than if he hadn't. One evening, Noah finally asked, "Are we in trouble?" Ava looked at him. "Why would you think that?" "Because everyone keeps saying stuff like that," Noah said. "And because you don't laugh anymore." Ava felt that one land. "I laugh," she said. Noah shook his head. "Not like before." Ava didn't answer. She reached across the table and squeezed Noah's hand. "We're okay." It sounded less convincing out loud. The following week, Daniel Mercer returned. He didn't come to the diner. He waited outside leaning against his car like he had all the time in the world. Ava spotted him through the window. She took a breath, wiped her hands, and stepped out. Daniel smiled. "I figured we'd talk." Ava crossed her arms. "I already said no." Daniel nodded. "You did, and I respected that." He gestured toward the street. "Things have been inconvenient lately." Ava held his gaze. "If this is about pressure, it's about reality." Daniel interrupted, still calm. "You're smart enough to see what's happening." Ava said nothing. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "This isn't personal. It never is. It's just easier when people recognize patterns early." Ava felt the anger then. Not explosive, controlled, focused. "Last night didn't just make you a headline," Daniel continued. "It cost powerful people money. It made you walk away, and it made the Whitmores look foolish." "I didn't do anything," Ava said. Daniel shrugged. "Exactly. That was the coldest part. The implication that refusing to play along was its own offense." Daniel straightened. "I'll make this simple. You sell. You walk away clean. Your son's life stays uncomplicated." Ava's jaw tightened. "And if I don't," Daniel paused, "then things continue as they are, and eventually they get harder." There was no threat in his voice, just certainty. Ava looked back at the diner, at the sign, at the windows that reflected the street more than what was inside now. "I won't sell," she said. Daniel studied her. "Think carefully." "I have." Daniel nodded once. "You have a week." He walked away without another word. Inside, Ava locked the door and sat in her mother's chair. She stared at the wall until the light outside shifted. This was the moment people didn't see. Not the laughter, not the spill. The quiet part where a woman realizes the ground under her is being rearranged without her consent. At home that night, Noah found Ava in the kitchen, staring at nothing. "Did something bad happen?" Noah asked. Ava shook her head. "Something important happened." Noah frowned. "Is that worse?" Ava smiled faintly. "Sometimes." She didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, from planning. By morning, Ava understood something clearly. This wasn't about saving the diner. Not anymore. It was about deciding whether she would shrink quietly to make others comfortable or accept the cost of refusing to disappear. The pressure would keep coming. She knew that now. And for the first time since the laughter in that hall, Ava stopped asking herself how to make it stop and started asking a different question. What was she willing to lose to keep her son from learning the wrong lesson? The town meeting was scheduled for 7 in the evening. Ava arrived early. She parked farther down the street than usual and walked the rest of the way, hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders squared but relaxed. The building was already lit, warm yellow, spilling out through the windows. Inside chairs were being arranged in careful rows the way they always were when something important was supposed to feel orderly. Daniel Mercer was already there. He stood near the front, speaking quietly with 2 council members. One laughed. The other nodded serious, as if listening to a problem that needed solving. Daniel glanced up when Ava entered, his expression smooth, untroubled. He gave a small nod, confident, the look of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. Ava didn't nod back. She took a seat in the 3rd row, close enough to be seen, far enough not to be invited into side conversations. Around her, people filtered in. Some recognized her and looked away. Others pretended not to. A few offered tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Noah wasn't there. Ava had left him at home with a neighbor telling him this meeting would be boring. That was only partly true. When the room filled, the council chair called the meeting to order. Routine announcements followed, zoning updates, budget notes, nothing unusual. Then Daniel stood. He didn't need to introduce himself. People knew who he was. He spoke calmly, confidently, framing everything as concern for the town's future. Words like growth and opportunity came easily to him. He gestured toward charts no one questioned. He spoke about underused properties and long-term planning. Then he mentioned the diner. Not by name, not directly, just enough for everyone to know. Ava listened without reacting. She didn't shift in her seat. She didn't frown. She didn't interrupt. She let Daniel finish. When Daniel sat down, the room hummed with low murmurs. A council member cleared her throat and asked if anyone wished to speak. Ava stood. The sound of the chair legs scraping against the floor cut through the room sharper than expected. Several heads turned at once. Daniel's eyes narrowed just slightly. Ava walked to the front without rushing. "I won't take much time," she said. Her voice was even. Not loud, not apologetic. "This diner has been part of this town longer than most of us have been alive," Ava continued. "Not because it was profitable every year, not because it was convenient, because it served people." A few faces shifted. Someone crossed their arms. Ava glanced briefly at Daniel, then back to the room. "I've been asked to sell. More than once. I've been advised. Warned." She paused. Not for effect. To choose her words. "I'm not going to sell," she said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel leaned back, unconcerned. But Ava continued. "I'm also not going to pretend this place belongs to me alone anymore." That got their attention. Ava reached into her jacket and removed a single sheet of paper. She held it up, not theatrically. Just enough to be seen. "This morning," she said, "I signed documents transferring ownership of Cole's into a community trust." The room went silent. Daniel's posture changed. Subtle. Alert. "The trust belongs to the people who've worked here," Ava continued. "The people who eat here. The people who've depended on it. No single buyer, no outside control." A council member leaned forward. "Ms. Cole." I'm stepping down as owner, Ava said calmly. Effective immediately. Gasps broke the silence. Daniel stood abruptly. That's not. Ava raised a hand. Not aggressive. Final. I'll still work here, Ava said. I'll still open the doors. I'll still cook. But I won't be the leverage anyone uses anymore. Daniel stared at her disbelief, cracking his composure. You can't just... I already did, Ava replied. The words landed cleanly. For the first time since the fundraiser, Ava felt the room shift again. Not toward her, around her. People glanced at each other. Confusion replaced certainty. The narrative Daniel had been building slipped through his fingers. You're throwing everything away, Daniel said sharply. Ava looked at him. No, I'm giving it back. The council chair tried to regain control. This is highly irregular. So was what happened in that hall, Ava said quietly. No one laughed this time. Daniel's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Ava nodded once. That's my right. The meeting ended awkwardly. Conversations erupted in clusters. People whispered. Some avoided Ava. Others watched her with something new in their eyes. Daniel didn't speak again. He left quickly, phone already in his hand, expression hard. Ava stayed until the room emptied. She stacked her chair, pushed it under the table. Outside, the night felt cooler, lighter. At home, Noah was waiting. Did you fix it? He asked. Ava knelt in front of him. I changed it. Noah frowned. Did we lose Ava? Considered the question. We gave something up. Noah nodded slowly. Why Ava met his eyes. So no one could take it from us again. Noah thought about that. Then he leaned forward and hugged Ava tightly, arms locked around her neck. Ava held him back. Somewhere across town, Daniel Mercer sat in his car, staring at his phone, realizing for the first time that the usual pressure points no longer applied. And Ava, driving home with her son beside her, understood that the most dangerous thing she had done wasn't refusing to sell. It was removing herself from the game entirely without asking permission. The relief didn't last. Ava felt it for one night, maybe two. The quiet after the meeting, the sense that the ground had stopped moving under her feet. She slept deeper than she had in weeks. Then the consequences arrived. They didn't come all at once. They never did. The first call came from the bank. Polite, careful, full of phrases like reviewing terms and adjusting expectations. Ava listened without interrupting, then thanked the woman on the line for her time. When the call ended, she sat at the kitchen table for a long moment, staring at the wall across from her. The trust protected the diner. That part worked exactly as intended. It didn't protect her. By midweek, the diner was busier than it had been in days. People came out of curiosity at first. Some to show support, others to see if the rumors were true. Ava worked the grill, took orders, refilled coffee. She didn't explain anything unless asked. But the money didn't flow the way it used to. She no longer decided where profits went. That had been the point. The trust handled distributions. Bills still existed. Her mortgage still existed. Noah's school still existed. Responsibility didn't disappear just because ownership did. Ava picked up extra shifts, opened earlier, closed later. Her back ached in a way it hadn't in years. At night, when the diner finally emptied, she sat alone at the counter with a cup of coffee she rarely finished. She didn't regret the decision. She just hadn't expected how lonely the aftermath would feel. People treated her differently now, some with admiration, others with caution, a few with resentment. You made a statement, one man said, shaking his head as if impressed and irritated at the same time. Ava nodded. I made a choice. The man smiled thinly. Choices have ripple effects. So did pressure. Daniel Mercer understood that. Ava didn't see Daniel again, but she felt him everywhere, in delays, in complications, in questions that never quite resolved. A supplier returned, then left again. A permit review dragged on longer than usual. A letter arrived requesting clarification on a matter Ava had never been asked to clarify before. None of it was illegal. None of it was direct. It was exhausting. One afternoon, Noah came into the diner after school and found Ava sitting in her mother's old chair, head in her hands. "Are you sick?" Noah asked. Ava looked up quickly. "No, just tired." Noah dropped his backpack and sat across from her. "Everyone's talking about you." Ava managed a smile. "That's not new." "They say you're brave," Noah said. "And also stupid." Ava chuckled softly. "Those two things aren't always far apart." Noah frowned. "Did you mess up?" The question landed heavier than any letter or call. Ava thought carefully before answering. "I made the best decision I could with the information I had." Noah watched her closely. "That's not what I asked." Ava leaned back in the chair. "She didn't rush this one." "I don't know yet," she said honestly. Noah nodded, absorbing it. "Okay." That night, Ava reviewed her finances alone at the table. Numbers didn't scare her. Uncertainty did. She adjusted where she could, cut what she could, accepted that some things would simply be tighter. She didn't sleep much. The next morning, a reporter stood outside the diner. "I just want to comment," the woman said brightly. Ava shook her head. "I don't have one." "People are calling you a symbol," she added. Ava met her eyes. "I'm not interested in being one." She hesitated. "Some say you're hurting yourself." Ava shrugged. "Some people measure everything that way." The article came out anyway. Balanced, they called it. Ava didn't read it. What she couldn't avoid was Noah's reaction at school. A boy asked him if his mom was poor now. Another asked if they were going to move. Noah came home quieter than usual. Ava noticed immediately. "They asked me stuff Noah said after dinner." Ava waited. "I didn't know what to say." Noah continued. "I told them you did what you thought was right." Ava nodded. That was enough. Noah looked down. Was it? Ava reached across the table and placed her hand over Noah's. "Sometimes being right doesn't feel good right away." Noah thought about that. "Do you feel good?" Ava hesitated. "I feel steady." That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. Late one night, Ava sat alone in the diner, lights low, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. She thought about her mother, about the way she used to handle pressure. She never fought head on. She waited people out. "Don't let them rush you," she used to say. "That's how they win." Ava exhaled slowly. The next day, something unexpected happened. An envelope appeared on the counter before opening. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "You fed my family when we couldn't pay. Let me help now." There was cash inside, not charity level, not life-changing, just enough to matter. Ava folded the note carefully and placed it in the register. By the end of the week, more followed. Notes, small contributions, quiet gestures, no announcements, no speeches. Ava didn't advertise it. She didn't thank anyone publicly. She just kept working. Daniel Mercer, meanwhile, was learning what it meant to lose leverage. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to feel it. A project stalled. A meeting got postponed. A partner asked questions. Pressure, Ava realized, worked both ways. It just took longer when it came from people instead of institutions. One evening after closing, Noah sat at the counter swinging his legs. "Do you think they'll stop?" he asked. Ava wiped her hands. "Eventually." "Why?" "Because this way costs them more than it costs us." Noah smiled faintly. You're tired. Ava smiled back. I know. She locked the door and turned off the lights one by one. Not because it mattered, because it reminded her that the place still woke and rested on her terms. The cost was real. The uncertainty hadn't vanished. But for the first time since the laughter in that hall, Ava didn't feel hunted. She felt tested, and that she knew was something she could survive without teaching her son the wrong lesson. It didn't start with applause. There was no announcement, no speech, no headline that marked the change. It started the way most real shifts do, with small, almost invisible decisions made by people who didn't think of themselves as brave. A man Ava hadn't seen in months came in one morning and sat at the counter like nothing had changed. He ordered the same breakfast he always had, ate quietly, left a larger tip than usual, and a short note folded under the plate. Still your place. Ava read it once, then slid it into the drawer beneath the register. Later that day, a woman brought her children in after school. She pointed at the booths and told them stories about when she used to come here with her father. Ava caught fragments as she worked. Laughter, memory, familiarity. It wasn't support the way people talked about it online. It was something steadier, something slower. The diner filled again, but not the way it had before. Not out of habit, out of intention. People asked questions now. Not about the deal, about the trust, about how it worked, about whether they could help without making it a spectacle. Ava answered when she could. When she couldn't, she said so. Noah noticed first. They look at you different, he said one afternoon, watching from a booth as Ava moved between tables. How, Ava asked. Like you're still here, Noah said. Not like before. Ava nodded. She felt it too. Some people still stayed away. That didn't change. A few crossed the street instead of coming in. A few stopped returning her nods altogether. Ava let them go. She had learned the difference between loss and clarity. Daniel Mercer, on the other hand, grew more visible. Not at the diner, around town. He attended meetings, hosted dinners, spoke loudly about investment confidence and stability. He smiled a lot. He worked harder than before to be seen as reasonable. It didn't land the same way anymore. A council member who used to linger in his conversations now cut them short. A business owner asked sharper questions. Someone laughed at a joke that wasn't meant to be funny. Daniel felt it. He just didn't know how to name it. At school, Noah's days improved quietly. The questions slowed. The whispers faded. One boy apologized without being prompted. Another asked if Noah wanted to trade snacks. Noah came home lighter. They stopped, he said one evening. Ava nodded. People get bored of being unkind. Noah thought about that. Or maybe they ran out of permission. Ava smiled. That too. On a Friday afternoon, the diner closed early for the first time in weeks. Ava didn't announce it. She just locked the door and turned the sign. Inside, a small group gathered former employees, current staff, a few regulars who'd asked if they could help. They didn't sit in rows. They pulled chairs into a loose circle. No agenda. No leader. Ava stood near the counter, hands resting on the edge. I didn't do this so people would thank me, she said. I did it so no one could take it. A woman spoke up. We know. A man added, that's why it matters. They talked about shifts, about responsibilities, about what it meant to protect something without owning it. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't neat. But it was honest. When it ended, no one clapped. They cleaned up together. As they left, Noah lingered near the door. Can I say something? He asked. The room quieted. Ava turned. Noah swallowed. I just want to say, thank you for coming here, for helping my mom. She didn't tell me to say that. Ava felt her throat tighten. She said nothing. People nodded, smiled. One woman wiped her eyes quickly and looked away. Afterward, Noah walked beside Ava down the quiet street. "You didn't know I was going to do that," Noah said. Ava shook her head. "No." Noah smiled. "I wanted to." That night, Ava slept without waking. Across town, Daniel Mercer stared at a calendar filled with meetings that suddenly felt less certain. A partner had delayed a decision. Another asked to revisit terms. No one accused him of anything. They didn't have to. Influence, he was learning, depended on agreement, and agreement was no longer automatic. Ava didn't celebrate that. She noticed it the way you notice weather changing. Useful information, nothing more. One evening, as the diner closed, Ava found her mother's old chair had been repaired again. Someone had fixed it without asking, reinforced the legs, smoothed the armrest. No note, no explanation. Ava sat in it for a moment, testing the weight. It held. Noah leaned against the counter. "Are we okay now?" Ava considered the question. "We're not finished," she said. "But we're not alone." Noah nodded, satisfied. Outside, the streetlights came on, one by one. The diner's windows glowed warm against the dark. People passed and glanced, in some stopping, some just noticing. The place hadn't gone back to what it was. It had become something else. And Ava, standing there with her son beside her, understood that the room that once laughed had lost something it couldn't get back. It had forgotten how to decide for everyone else. Now, people were choosing for themselves. Time didn't fix everything. It clarified it. By late fall, the diner settled into a new rhythm, not the old one. Not the one Ava remembered from years ago when the place ran on habit and expectation. This one was quieter, intentional. The doors still opened early. Coffee still brewed before sunrise. But the sense of ownership in the room had changed. Ava worked the same shifts. She wiped the same counters. She knew which regular preferred their mug warmed first. To anyone passing by, it probably looked like nothing had happened. That was the point. She wasn't in charge anymore, not in the way people usually meant it. Decisions were discussed. Responsibilities were shared. When problems came up, they were handled without asking Ava to absorb them alone. She didn't miss the authority. She missed the illusion of safety that came with it. But illusions, she had learned, were expensive. One evening, as she locked up, Ava noticed Noah lingering near the counter again. Older now, taller, less likely to disappear into himself when rooms shifted. "You remember that night?" Noah asked casually. Ava didn't pretend not to know which one. "I do." Noah nodded. "I used to think about it all the time." And now Noah shrugged. "Not as much." They stood there in the soft hum of the lights. The diner smelled like soap and warm metal. "Some kids asked me about it again," Noah added. "They wanted to know if you were mad." Ava smiled faintly. "What did you say I said you weren't?" Noah replied. "You just didn't play along." Ava laughed quietly. It surprised her how accurate that was. Across town, Daniel Mercer still attended meetings, still spoke about development and opportunity. But people listened differently now. They interrupted, asked for details, didn't fill silences for him. He never contacted Ava again. Not because he couldn't, because the conversation no longer worked the way it used to. Ava didn't take satisfaction in that. She noticed it the way you notice a door no longer opening when you push it. Information, nothing more. On the anniversary of her mother's death, Ava arrived early and unlocked the diner alone. She sat in her chair and waited for the place to wake up around her. She thought about the way her mother used to run the room, how she never demanded respect. She assumed it. And when it wasn't there, she didn't chase it. People came in slowly. Some she recognized. Some she didn't. Noah worked the counter that morning, joking with a customer like he'd been doing it for years. Ava watched him and felt something loosen. At noon, a small group gathered near the window, not for Ava, for the diner. Someone had brought a cake. Someone else brought coffee from another place, insisting on contributing. No speeches, no photos, just people eating together. Later that day, Ava stepped outside for air and saw Daniel across the street stepping out of a building. They noticed each other at the same time. Daniel hesitated. Ava didn't. She nodded once. Polite. Finished. Daniel nodded back. Smaller. Then turned away. Ava went back inside. If you've stayed with this story to this point, it's probably not because you were waiting for a dramatic punishment or a loud victory. It's because you recognize what it feels like when the ground shifts under someone who didn't ask for the fight, but refused to disappear. Stories like this tend to linger because they don't end with applause. They end with people choosing differently the next time a room decides who matters. That night, Ava closed the diner and walked home with Noah. The streetlights flickered on. Windows glowed. The town felt the same and different all at once. "Do you think they learned anything?" Noah asked. Ava thought about it. Some did. And the others, Ava shrugged. They'll keep repeating things until it costs them something. Noah nodded, satisfied. At home, Ava washed her jacket. The last faint stain finally disappeared. She hung it to dry and didn't check on it again. Before bed, she sat at the kitchen table and opened a notebook she hadn't touched in years. She wrote a few lines, not plans, not goals, just reminders. Show up, don't rush, let people reveal themselves. She closed it and turned off the light. Outside, the town moved on. New conversations replaced old ones. Different names filled the rooms where hers once had been erased. Ava didn't need it back. What mattered was this when her son stood beside her. Now rooms no longer decided who she was before she could speak. And that was enough. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this story, quietly, without needing to announce it, others probably did too. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations happen where people compare experiences instead of conclusions. And sometimes, staying close to stories like this is simply a way of reminding yourself you're not imagining what you felt. Ava slept through the night. In the morning, the diner lights came on one by one.